And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today's a special day for me because I've got a guest that's a friend and someone that I've known for quite some time, Juliet Funt. Say hi, Juliet.
Hello.
Hey, so let me give you Juliet's background. For those of you who don't know her, Juliet is the CEO of WhiteSpace at Work, which is a training and consulting firm that helps organizations, their leaders, and employees flips the norms of business in order to reclaim their creativity, productivity, and engagement. Juliet is an amazing keynoter. If you haven't seen her speak or hired her to speak, you need to. She's one of the best out there. And welcome. Welcome
Hey.
today. This is fun. It's so nice to have you on.
Yeah, I'm at the end of a lovely long week and it's fun to have a call with a friend. So that's
There
great.
you go. So let's just dive right in. So you have been at this for quite some time as a speaker and a CEO of a company that intervenes with folks in the corporate world and helps them live a better life. How'd you get here? How'd this happen?
Well, of course, we worked together in the early days of the company. Um, and one of the things that I tend to say when I'm in a safe environment with friends is we're a 5-year-old company, but we call ourselves a 3-year-old company because we made so many mistakes in the first 2 years, we just don't count them. Um, what's fun about that sharing is not that it's unusual to share it. What's fun is that every single entrepreneur in the world nods and laughs and understands that that's this natural life cycle of building a business. And when can get to a place where you're forgiving about that, it's really very freeing, especially since I've never met anyone who didn't identify. And so
Yep.
it's been, I would say, about a 3 to 4 year process of being informed and really doing this, and also being appreciative of how slow it takes to build this. I'm an unusual entrepreneur is that I've never really understood the full-time work schedule. It just seems like too many hours a week to me. So I tend to work less than some other people building a business. I don't really do the 50, 60-hour thing. And so my company moves forward slower, but in a way that really works for my life.
I love it.
And kind of that's where we are. So we're really in still a young area, but we're really starting to blossom. And what we do is we help people reduce busy work so they can execute better. And every company in the world is too busy. So there's lots and lots of potential. And what we're learning now is the art of helping people see that that's a solvable problem and looking a little into the future of their work and becoming less casual about being complacent about the problem.
So let's actually go back a little bit. Let's talk about that. So even though the company's somewhere between 3 and 5 years, right? So we're not the first to lie about our ages here, right?
Yes,
Um,
right, right.
but I think that you're missing a piece here. Is prior to that, you were an incredibly successful keynote
Oh,
speaker.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to. So what I want to do is talk about, because you sort of jumped through that. You hit a level at the keynote side that most people never hit. So talk for a moment about sort of the start as the keynote and then transforming into a content based business, because that's a big deal.
Yes. So sorry about that. I think of it as two totally separate conversations. So I've been keynoting for 20 something years, and I started out in youth and education and did high schools and gyms and colleges and learned the chops. And I had a really lucky combination of assets in that I was an actress and an improv comic in college, but I was really curious about human development and people in business. And so they kind of just came together really naturally. The youth and education stuff turned into talking to the parents and the parents' corporations, and I out that the corporate space was much more my angle. And then for 20 years, I've been building the skills and the speeches and the flow and the stories. And it's kind of like when a musician plays the same songs over and over and over and over. You just keep getting better at the art of each beat and the art of each piece. And I was on the phone with Lou Heckler a couple days ago, who's one of the great, slightly older but classic performers of this age. And we were talking about how the actual art of the platform is something that is not even taught anymore in speaking
Right.
conferences. It's just all marketing and social media and but the art of the platform is why I was treated well in the speaking circuit and continue to be treated well. And it's a very particular practice oriented skill that I have gotten real good at. And I think sadly is not really focused on almost at all in the current upschooling of platform
No,
professionals.
and I love the way you put that. I can speak from firsthand experience. The first time I saw you speak, I was blown away not just by the intensity and the audience reaction, but everyone in the audience was convinced that you worked for that firm for 10 years because you did so much work to know all their little nuances and all their little rituals and all their different language. And to me, it's just so offensive when a professional keynoter getting top dollar is out there doing what I call a drive-by, right? Like they get on and it's like, hello, Cleveland. No, it's Pittsburgh. And how do you treat your
Yeah,
customers?
yeah,
We call
right.
them clients. Like, so, I mean, you put a lot of work into that and it shows and it's been rewarded on the stage and off the stage.
Yeah, I mean, it helps coming out of performance. The truth is, every keynote should probably go off and do a year or two of acting or improv class and just completely forget about speaking for a little while, because
Right.
it's the performance element is really, really important when the breakout session next to you decides to do a giant loud drum exercise and you have to find a way to continue to focus and look forward and not turn away and not be distracted. A lot of that is just performance chops. And so the more you focus on that, I think the better you are. And there's a generation of speakers that I adore. There are not as many of them now as they were before, who focus on that. And then when you're able to build relevant business content, truly intellectually stimulating ideas on top of the base of platform skills, then you can really get noticed in the world of speaking. Any one of those two or three without the others, I think, is a little bit like a stool without all three
Totally.
legs.
So at what point, so you're on the stage, you're speaking professionally, you're earning good money doing that, speaking to top level organizations around the globe. At what point did the light bulb go off to you that there's something potentially more than just keynoting? And there's nothing wrong with just keynoting, but where you said, wait a minute, this white space stuff that I'm putting out there, people seem to want more. And what does that look like? And how would I do that? Tell me about that journey a little bit.
Yeah, so it was, the aggregate knowledge of National Speakers Association started to move toward about 10 years ago, the idea of passive income, other products, sell. And so you can't be present in that universe without beginning to pick up a little bit of, hey, I should have something like that. But it didn't really, I was building something small, but it didn't really kick in until a specific client at a Fortune 500 company said, how do you scale this? So when that person, who happened to be Ed Gilligan of American Express, who passed away in a very, very sad circumstance at a very young age. But when he was around, he was the one who said, let's scale this. And at that time, I didn't have anything scalable. So I began the pursuit of building something that would work originally for that client. And then obviously realizing that that was a much broader need. And I've been so grateful, even though building the business part has been enormously emotionally more frustrating and difficult than building the keynote part. And and you're laughing because you were, we had drinks over much of that, um, but I will tell you that having something that can earn when you're not there is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm 51. I start thinking about the next 20 years of my life. I don't think I want to be on this many planes when I'm 70. And so, it's a wonderful thing from a life perspective, but also from a scaling your content perspective. If there's something that you really believe in, you can only give so many speeches.
Well, and there's right. There's a couple pieces of that. There's impact because I know that you truly believe in your work, right? That white space actually helps people have a more balanced, more manageable life,
Effect.
personally and
Yeah.
professionally. So there's that impact, that evangelical piece of it, and then there's also the financial piece. Like aren't too many keynoters out there. Well, maybe there's a couple in their 70s and 80s, and who wants to be doing all that, right? So what are the flavors that white space comes in now, right? So there's the keynote, and then how do you walk a client through the journey, and what's the promise of that?
Sure, good question. So it's always iterative. So we build it and then we keep tweaking it and changing it and improving it. We teach through a core of a digital micro learning platform. But unlike some micro learning or unlike some digital, it is not self paced. And that is really the key architect of our program, is that we work with clients to do the heavy lifting of making sure that all the learners in a group are orchestrated to progress in unison through a series of topics over a 9-month period. So we want them doing a lesson and then going back and playing with it in their life, and then another lesson and going back and playing it with it in their life. And we give them a lot of bells and whistles, accountability processes, handouts, all sorts of goodies to create this really rigorous system that can then sit around and support what is by nature sort of a soft delivery modality. So digital is very fluid and flexible, and you do it when you feel like it. So in order for it to then have bones, you have to put a lot of structure around it. So that's what we've spent a lot of time building and perfecting. And then with that, we have supplemental services depending on a client's passion and budget. So we do a lot of webcasty type stuff where I'm on, where me or now other trainers are on a web stream on email meetings or interruptions or executive presence or whatever we want to teach on. We have a developmental assessment. We have organizational assessments. We have some executive consulting work, although we try to keep that light for my own time commitments because I'm the only one who can
So
do
you have
that.
a full suite of various solutions targeted at different levels of the population at different price points. So you could really transform an entire organization with those tools and not have to literally, be jumping plane to plane to plane.
Yeah. So when we are able to sell a digital program that I don't kick off, which is about 50% of them now, the entire program runs and I have nothing to do with it except for when I particularly am interested in a client, I'm on that monthly hour check-in call. And it is, I tell you, it's a beautiful thing coming from the keynote model. I know your listeners are people who make a lot of their money probably keynoting, or maybe some of them do. Boy, when you do a deal and you realize that someone else is executing 85% of it, 90% of it, it's a beautiful feeling. It really is.
Right, and then what I know a lot of keynoters do is they look at that and they go, "Wow, that's the equivalent of 10 speeches, which is 24 days on the road, which is like that's
Yeah,
pretty cool."
right, right.
So, give me a sense because you've been sort of on the sell side, right? Getting this embedded in clients, the similarities and differences of selling these type of solutions from speaking, because speaking tends to be fairly transactional. Can you be in Scottsdale on January 7th? What's your fee? Are you fit? Whatever. But the world of B2B sales, not so transactional. So talk to that a bit if you could.
Yeah, so that's what all the Xanax is for, really. So
I thought that's for the airplane ride. So it's for the B2B sales. Okay.
no, no, it's for B2B sales
Are they a
because
sponsor, by
these
the way?
people,
Are they your...
well, yeah, they should be. They should be. And I feel very kindred to your listeners. So, and I also tend to be very open kimono. So if you target a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 clientele, which we have done so far, it is important for somebody to tell you that these people will drive you out of your friggin' mind. And it is one of the most difficult interpersonal processes that I've ever been in. What I do notice, and I'll tell you more, I can tell you more about that. But what I do notice is that when you're in a smaller to mid-sized company range, when there's 500, 1,000,
Right.
5,000, 10,000 employees, it is a pleasurable, learnable, manageable cycle that you can get good at, that you can feel peaceful during. And so we're transitioning all of our paid sales and marketing focus to mid-sized companies, even though we love Fortune 500 when they come to us. I'm on the speaking circuit. A certain number of them will find us, but they are so tied in the binds and wrappings of their corporate complexity that it's 2 to 3 years before you can sometimes make something happen. And it's not a nice 2 to 3 years. It's 2 to 3 years of over promising and complexity and unsurety and passive aggressive nose. And so you can hear that there's a lot for me behind that, but I'm saying it not only to vent, but with a passion for people who are getting into this to say this giant candy jar of the Fortune 500 and these amazing contracts, if and when they happen, it's a very, very, very nice day. But in the aggregate, my experience has been that I have not found it worth it for me, and that
Mhm.
we're moving to a different market that we enjoy much
And it's
more.
not that the people are necessarily different in the smaller companies. It's the processes and systems and how decisions get made and money gets.
Yeah, so I sat yesterday with a client. It's got 220 people. I sat with the CEO. We laughed. We showed each other pictures of our kids. He'll make a decision in 2 weeks. He'll either tell me yes or he'll tell me no, and that'll be it. And that's the beauty of a mid-sized
As
company.
opposed to a Fortune 100 where those conversations could take 9 months to get to sort of kind of maybe after they said we're definitely doing this and all that. But the paydays tend to be bigger at the larger firms.
No, the paydays are fantastic. And we're also in the process of getting smarter about those conversations. So I have plenty of friends from ISA, which is the Association of Learning Providers that I now participate in. They do Fortune 500 all day long. They love it. They have an estimated 18-month sales cycle, but they know during that process, they know what's coming. They're prepared for it. I mean, we might have just a shorter tolerance for that kind of delay and complexity, but we just are really happy with the
So
newer
more the mid
space.
caps and the smaller companies, it's easier to get to a decision maker. So the transactions might be a bit smaller, but you can increase the quantity that you're doing in the same sales time, the same cycle time.
And there's another reason too that's not money oriented, which is we're trying to transform a culture from one that is reactively busy, working 24/7, never disconnected from email, never had time to think, to one where it is normative to be pausing, thoughtful, recuperative, balanced. So in a Fortune 500 environment, the life cycle of moving that to a place where the dominant ancient culture is not sabotaging that work is so hard. Whereas with a small and mid-sized company, you can get your arms around most of the population or all of the population immediately, and they're all in the same philosophy and mindset. And so for us, it's much more gratifying watching a smaller company fully transform as opposed to watching a segment of a Fortune company battling the machine and maybe eventually rolling enterprise wide. We just find it more gratifying to see the holistic change that can occur in a
Well,
smaller
and it's
company.
easier to turn a rowboat around than a tanker, right? Just in terms of size and complexity. So that's great to understand the what it takes to really get embedded there, and the fact that you're experimenting with different markets, and there's pros and cons to each. So out there right now is probably several people that are of the mindset that you were 10, 15 years ago, 5, 10, 15 years ago. What would you recommend for them? And start off with the speaking piece, because you brushed through that fairly quickly. And I think you're one of the best in terms of the level of professionalism and the amount of energy that you put in. None of the other things would happen if you weren't killer at that space. But start there, sort of like, hey, I want to be a speaker, because how many times do we all hear that? A little love and a little advice. Maybe not a lot of love.
So I was on a platform yesterday, and Peyton Manning was later in the day, and I listened to him, and he was talking about just the practice part that there will be people who will outrun him, and there will be people who will out talent him, and there's nobody who will out practice him. And I really was thinking about that piece in terms of speaking, and I had been the day before at an event where I was doing a speech that I've done, a segment, a very small TED-like segment of a speech that I've done a million times. And I was backstage doing what I do, which is rehearsing for an hour before, going over it over and over and over to catch nuances and play with language and figure out where I could lift it differently. And I sort of identify with that feeling of I love to practice, and I really love what happens after you practice. And I think a lot of speakers are, when I started out, I would wing everything, and then I began really, really working on it. And when you're good, and when you're a great communicator, you can wing everything, but you don't realize the delta between a practiced speech and a winged speech. And so over the years, one of the things that I've become very appreciative of people who just put in the work, who stand up with a script in their hand or without a script in their hand and just do the practice. And I think that that is unspeakably important in terms of
And I think
impact.
most professions, you get an excuse to have an off day here and there, but not in this world, right? You've got 60 minutes or whatever that is to be on stage and kill it, and you can't have a bad day. It's not acceptable to have, well, it's, sort of Wednesday and she was kind of tired.
Yeah, now when you start moving up, especially, I mean, if you're a $5,000 speaker, there's some forgiveness in there. But if you're a $30,000 speaker, that's their annual budget they just spent on you. So no, yeah, there's no window there. So in terms of that's the platform skills piece, and then in terms of the building the practice piece, I always tell everybody the same thing. You should join National Speakers Association, but you should have very, very guarded boundaries about what you let in and what you don't let in at NSA. It's kind of been co-opted by a lot of people who are very into the sales piece, the social media piece. There's a smarmy kind of feeling to about 50% of the organization. But if you look at the other 50%, they're the most glorious human beings that you're ever going to meet. So you have to kind of separate that part. And then you have to do the most speeches that you can do until you get better. And that was what was told to me in my first week. This guy named Phil said the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. And I remember being so pissed at him.
That's a lot of speeches, but it's true.
Yeah, but it's some version of that is true. Rotary, friends groups, lunch and learn, small groups, ladies groups, just speak and speak and speak and speak, and then you get you develop your message over time, which is usually so iterative that people are then again disappointed or surprised that they don't have their core message in 2 years. That's kind of the last thing that I'll throw in is I think sometimes it takes 2, 5, 7 years to figure out what's the thing that I talk about. And you'll go through these phases where it blossoms into a next thing and a next thing. It took me about 8 years to really
Yep.
be the
And
WhiteSpace
there's also,
lady.
I would just add to that, the authenticity. When somebody's early on the speaking side, and I think we've all seen it, they're obviously taking elements of others, and it just doesn't fit on them, right? If somebody else is able to be funny and you're not a funny person, if somebody's able to come up with a woo-woo catchphrase and that just doesn't, those aren't words that come out of your mouth naturally, you have to experiment, but finding your own voice and being authentic, and being willing to be vulnerable.
Well, and since you said the word taking, let's just take 1 second to say to anyone who really is a beginner out there that just the simple fact should probably be said out loud that you cannot do somebody else's material, that you cannot retell a story, you cannot tell a model without crediting it. It is shocking to me how many speakers think, "Oh, I heard this and I'll just say it." And that's not okay.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not okay. And I think that goes from the comedy world to the speaking world. You will not be uh, well received at the next NSA event.
Yeah, but you have to say it. It's crazy that you have to say it, but
Yep.
you,
So
you
no,
kind
no
of do.
stealing, which is always a good thing to remember.
Correct.
Anyway, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being transparent and sharing your journey from, on the speaking side to the business side, from big business to mid-sized businesses. Great, great, great stuff. I encourage folks to go back and listen to this again. And again, I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you haven't seen Juliet speak or haven't hired her to speak, you need to do so. She's one of the best out there, and I mean that. And I've seen many, many, many over the years. So thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.